podcast made by basketball fans for basketball fans. From the hottest takes, news, analysis, and passion for the sport that we all love, this is the Fast Break Pod with Finn James and Will Tremaine. Welcome into the Fast Break Podcast. It's your boy Finn James here with my boy
Will Tremaine.
Yes, sir. The podcast made by basketball fans.
For basketball fans.
That is the one. First episode ever on the podcast. If you're new around here, obviously you'll be as the first episode. Two boys from New Zealand with a love for basketball.
England, actually.
One boy from England, one boy from the mighty Cantabrians of the South Island. But we're both up here in Auckland, big old basketball fans. Starting off with our love for the NBA and falling in love with the Breakers from a young age. Just a podcast about everything hoops. Hopefully from a little bit of a Kiwi spin, some could say. A little bit about myself. 22, young guy. I've been playing basketball for 12 years probably. Fell in love with the Breakers when I moved up to Auckland, maybe in 2012. So the glory days of the New Zealand Breakers, and then started watching Clipper Nation back in 2015. Good old Blake Griffin, Chris Paul, Lob City, and fell in love ever since.
Tease.
And just indulged in the greatest bouncy ball code of all time. So yeah. What about you?
Well, myself, I was never a big basketball fan growing up. I fell in love with, I suppose many of you as well, the 2016 NBA Finals.
Fair.
Greatest of all time. And so I was a Golden State Warriors fan for a little while.
Bandwagon.
Yeah, but I watched them the following year play the Blazers, round one, and I just fell in love with Damian Lillard. As you do.
Yeah.
As you can see behind me. And from there, I just fell in love with the sport. Been a massive NBA fan for a while now. Just recently become a fan of the Breakers. PJC had a lot to do with that.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, just keen to get involved, watch the games, and break them down for you guys. So looking forward to the upcoming season. And yeah.
Absolutely. But this podcast is mostly going to be covering all things hoops. But I feel like there's going to be a definite focus on the New Zealand Breakers being our local team here in Auckland. We're going to try to get down to some games, get a real sense for Breaker Nation. Obviously, I've been heavily involved, big Breakers fan since the early 2000s. I think Thomas Abercrombie was my favorite player as a kid until I fell in love with Blake Griffin.
Very fair.
And then the old Paul George, even though he has broken my heart in the recent off season, but
that's a bad shot.
We don't talk about this. We're gonna have a little bit of feud coming on here as well with Paul George and Dame. A little bit of history there. But yeah, definitely going to be breaking down a lot of the Breakers season for sure. The last 2 years have been very interesting. Obviously last year came a bit short, finishing 6th overall, and then having a little stint in the play-in tournament. But the year before, going all the way to the finals, under Coach Modi for that first season. Definitely kind of reignited my love for the Breakers after a few pretty rough years playing in Tasmania. So, they've definitely captured a lot of fans in recent years. So I thought, why not make a podcast, break it down, and hopefully shine some light on a great franchise that's hopefully moving in a really good direction.
And boy, don't we have an interesting team this season.
Very interesting team.
PJC coming back, the return. It's quite rare for international players to sign on for a second year. So that's going to be interesting to see how well he does, if he can have another MVP caliber season. We've also got Mojave King coming over, drafted into the NBA, played in the G League for a bit. So it's going to be interesting to see how his game comes in for the Breakers.
Yeah.
And got the same old players. We've got some returning Kiwis, Sam Menenga, coming back from Australia, former Westlake boy, like people like Tom Abercrombie, Corey Webster. Very storied history there. And some more American international imports, if you want to break those down for us, Finn.
Yeah, we'll start with PJC. Obviously, you covered him at the start there very briefly. We haven't had an American import or an import in general from the Breakers' return on a second year since I think back in Cedric Jackson, back in the early 2010s. Obviously,
what a legend.
A legend of the Breakers for sure. Obviously, I think he won an MVP of the league back in that little stint as well with a few championships. He was a huge player, and you know, with PJC returning after an absolute a monstrous debut season in NBL 24, obviously, you know, finished third in MVP. I think he was second in the league in scoring with 20 a game, alongside Anthony Lamb as well. But obviously, Bryce Cotton took the scoring title as he always does.
And he can pass.
He can pass. 6 assists a game there. I think he might have been the lead in the league in steals as well, with almost 2.5 a game. So him returning, I think, is going to be massive this year. Will, what do you think?
I think that bringing his experience that he's had from 4 years of playing college basketball at Arizona, a very renowned university in the States, just bringing that level of talent, and also having a long, storied career in Europe. We saw what he did last year. He led our team to the playoffs. Very talented team. We had Moses Moody. Unfortunately, he's not being able to return this season. But when he's on form, he is an absolute bucket getter.
Did you say Moses Moody returning? You mean Zylan Cheatham and Anthony Lamb?
No, the coach.
Oh, Modi Mayor.
Modi Mayor.
You said Moses Moody.
Sorry for that mix-up there.
I don't think the Golden State Warriors shooting guard is the coach.
Yeah, you can see where I went wrong there, though.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It happens, man.
Big NBA fans here.
Yeah, well, you know, with Modi Mayor leaving, it's quite an interesting one, right? So he came with Dan Shamir a few seasons back, and, you know, Dan Shamir was supposed to really reignite the Breakers team. You know, it was the first time we'd had an international coach come in that wasn't from Australia or New Zealand. So, I mean, Dan Shamir coming in, honestly, it failed. And we're not going to sugarcoat it. The Breakers really went downhill when Dan Shamir came in. But Modi was always there. I remember he was very animated on the bench. Like, as a big Breakers fan watching them on TV, he was always screaming at the refs and the players. When he got announced as head coach a few years back, you know, I don't know what to expect. But his first season at head coach, you know, taking them, I can't remember what they finished. It might have been the top 3. To make it all the way to the finals and play in a game 5 in Sydney and, you know, almost take out a chip in his first season. I thought last year was going to be a bit of a repeat. Obviously didn't happen, but I feel like that you can't really put it on Modi, and there was a lot of injuries last year, so did suck. But, you know, Modi leaving, I'm not sure if PJC knew that was going to happen, but, I mean, he came out after Modi left, after the PJC had re-signed, and said Modi Mayor leaving was not a big factor. But, you know, we got the new coach, the Finnish basketball legend, Petteri Koponen. He's a first-time head coach. He just had a little stint in the Summer League with the San Antonio Spurs, so he's got a little bit of international experience. Probably one of the best Finnish basketball players of all time. He's drafted 30th back in the early 2000s as well. It's going to be interesting, you know, a first-time head coach. Modi was a first-time head coach. Might bring a little bit of pizzazz. You know, the 2 imports he's brought in with Matthew Mooney and Freddie Gillespie, must have seen something in them. They had a bit of experience over in Europe as well. So it'll be interesting to see how this squad plays out, considering it's not really what you would call Breakers culture, is it, Will?
No, it's not. And that wealth of knowledge that he's going to be bringing from spending that summer league for the San Antonio Spurs, you know, they had a very highly regarded rookie drafted into their team this year, Stephon Castle. To be able to coach him and watch his game, it will be interesting to see if he can bring some of those aspects and help out our guards on the Breakers.
Absolutely. I mean, he was a lights-out shooter for Finland. I mean, he had a really long pro career, so I think, you know, with a young head coach, might bring some spice to the Breakers.
Yep.
Although, you know, as a Breakers fan that's been around for a while, and, you know, the success really came from a core of New Zealanders. You know, Thomas Abercrombie, Mika Vukona, big.
Corey Webster. How do you?
And Corey Webster as well. My apologies. Massive reasons for like the success of that Breakers in the early 2010s. There's only I think 3 Kiwis on the main 12-man roster for the Breakers this year, which I'm not sure how I'm feeling yet.
I think it's good for the game.
You think it's good for the game?
We need you know, it's becoming a global game. You're seeing it in the NBA as well. Just the more players you can get in from overseas, it brings different types of basketball, teaches people different game plans. I think it's going to be very interesting, and, you know, it's really proving that the NBL is right up there as one of the best pathways to make it to the highest level in basketball.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with you, man. I think the NBL has definitely jumped onto the scene in the probably last like maybe 5 or 6 years.
I think it all started with LaMelo Ball.
Ball and RJ Hampton, you know, back in 2019.
Seeing what he's doing now in the league, he's just absolute bucket getter. Unfortunate with the injuries, but what him and RJ Hampton started with the Next Stars program. I think that was massive for
Huge.
the NBL.
Huge.
And you see it every year. The Breakers are actually one of the main teams who get top level Next Stars every year. We saw it last year with
Mantas
Matas
Rooster
Roosevelt,
Vicious.
and before that, Rayon Rupert, also a very good player.
And Uj Mending.
And Uj
Who was a
Mending.
lottery pick, actually,
Yes.
for the Thunder. That's a great segue. As we, cast our eye over the next star for the next 2 seasons, actually.
Karim Lopez.
The young Mexican star who's considered and regarded as probably one of the best young international prospects in the game.
Yep.
It's hard to say a lot about him because I'm not going to be here and pretend like I've seen a lot of highlights from him. But what I have seen is very promising. A young 6'7" small forward, athletic, can shoot the ball, put the ball on the floor. I think he might only be 17. So
Crazy potential.
super young, ridiculous potential. It'll be really interesting to see how Petteri Koponen injects him into the lineup. If he does, I have a strong feeling that he's definitely going to play some big minutes for the Breakers this year.
Yeah, and I'd love to see him just get taken under the wing by some of these more experienced players for the Breakers. He doesn't have to jump straight into a starting role. He can just develop, learn new things from these players, and who knows, maybe by considering he's signed on a 2-year deal, that could really prove something coming into next year.
Yeah, that's the thing with these next stars, right? I feel like you don't really have anything to lose because they're so young. I feel like the reason they come is to try and develop their game for the next level. And I feel like when you take on a next star, it's a bit of a gamble. It really is. Yeah. So they're either going to be somebody that kind of gets taken under the wing, doesn't really play much. But I feel like in this case with Karim Lopez, who's, has ridiculous potential and a crazy build, there's a real chance for him to actually have a really big impact on this team. Kind of like Mantas Rupstavicius did last year, like a lights out shooter, a young Lithuanian guy that, not many people knew. He came in and had a genuine impact, just a lot of heart. Came up short in the draft last year.
And you saw him really progress throughout the season. He started off, and I'm not going to lie, I had some queries. I had my doubts about how he was going to do, but you just saw every game he just got better and better. So it just goes to show the wealth of knowledge that these coaches and the Breakers have and how they're able to develop young players.
Exactly, and it's a genuine pathway instead of going to college now, because with these young players being able to come in and be surrounded by multiple and year pros and literal veterans of the game, I think is something that is incredibly rare. And I think, a massive hat off to Liam Santamaria, who is the next star GM. He's done an incredible job with the NBL in that sense. And it's put the NBL on a much bigger global map, and it's made it a much more competitive league for sure.
100%. Leading on to the next player I'd like to talk about, Finn, we have Jonah Bolden. So
crazy story.
He was actually in the league, in the NBA, at the highest level. And can you tell us a little bit about what his story was and how he actually ended up quitting basketball and now making a return to the New Zealand Breakers?
Yeah, a bit of an interesting one with him, because he did a one-and-done year in UCLA back in 2016, I think. Might have been 2017, actually. I might lie there. Then was picked up at the 36th pick in the 2017 draft. Did a little stint in the NBA with, I think it was the 76ers. And then he kind of got slipped off the NBA, signed a 10-day contract with the Suns. And then in 2020, decided to hang up the boots, man. At 25 years old, Jonah Bolden decided he'd retire from the game of basketball. Took a 3-year gap, and then all of a sudden popped up back on the Sydney Kings last year. Everyone had a lot of high hopes for him. Obviously, the Sydney Kings didn't work out. They were knocked out on the Breakers in that first play-in tournament game. But signing an experienced athletic 4-man to start for the Breakers this season, I think it was a no-brainer. It'll be interesting to see how he goes, in a new environment. Hopefully, it's a second chance for him. Obviously, he didn't have the best year last year. Only 8.5 points and 6 rebounds. It'll be interesting to see how he's paired up with Freddie Gillespie, the other import that we have on.
And I think it was very courageous of him. I just want to take a moment to notice how, he stepped away from the game of basketball because he admits he lost his love for it. And I think that's an extremely courageous thing to come out and say. Just happy to see that he's regained that love for basketball, and he's now bringing that, really well-rounded skill set to the New Zealand Breakers. I think he's going to be an integral part to our title run this year, hopefully.
Title run. I'm
Yes.
hoping, man. I feel, big shout out to Jonah Bolden, man. It's
Yeah.
really hard to step away from a game and then come back to it and
Yeah.
still be at a very professional and competitive level. I don't know how much practice he was doing in that 3 years where he stepped away from the game, but for him to come back and still be able to compete at the highest level is crazy. But it's funny you say title run this year.
Yeah.
What kind of expectations do you have for the Breakers this year? Because I'm in a bit of a pickle, so I want you to go first here.
My expectation for the Breakers' upcoming season is I truly do believe that we can win it all this year.
Wow. That's a crazy take, bro.
PJC, okay, hear me out. 20-6 last year for the Breakers. It's only going to go north, okay?
You think?
I think. We lost Zylan Cheatham last year.
Anthony
He was a
Lamb.
big part. Anthony Lamb, also a massive scorer, brought a lot of buckets to the table.
Yep.
Who are those going to go to? I think a big chunk of them are going to go to PJC. I would expect around 24, 25 points per game
Wow.
from PJC and another MVP caliber season. Definitely leading the Breakers into the playoffs and hopefully going all the way.
So you think he's going to take on sort of like a Bryce Cotton at the Perth Wildcats type of role where he's just that main guy, short, fast, shifty
Exactly.
guard who's... Yeah, well, he averaged 20 a game last year, which was second in the NBL behind Bryce Cotton.
Yeah.
The third player in the NBL last year in points per game was Anthony Lamb, who also averaged 20.
Exactly.
So I can see where you're coming from, where, now
He
that
has a very
Anthony Lamb is
similar
gone,
skill set to Bryce Cotton as well. So
very similar. And it's going to be interesting. And I feel like you might be right, because, the other imports we have replacing Anthony Lamb with Matt Mooney,
Yep. Let's talk about him for a second.
a shooting guard out of America, had a little stint in the NBA. He played a few games he played a game for the New York Knicks and 4 games for the Cleveland Cavaliers. Did 4 years in college in 3 different schools. So he started off as the Air Force as a freshman.
Air Force.
Super random.
Wow.
Did 2 years at South Dakota where he averaged 18 points a game, and then finished off his collegiate career at Texas Tech, a very renowned school.
Very.
Went undrafted in 2019, played around US and Europe, and now he's just kind of ended up at the Breakers. A good shooting guard, very skilled guy, a little bit of a veteran. It'll be interesting to see how many points he averages. He might not be on that 20 points per game that Anthony Lamb was on last year, so I can really see why PJC might pick up a few more buckets this year. And yeah, you never know. He might really lead that league in scoring. He's got the experience from last season as well now, so yeah, I don't know. Interesting. It's really interesting. Like, I've thought about it a lot. Where do the Breakers finish this year? My expectations are super low. And
Super low?
And I'll tell you why.
Explain this, Finn.
I'll tell you why. I think I've said this a lot. My expectations for the Breakers season this year is incredibly low. And it's because we have a completely new roster. It's built from the ground up. We have a brand new coach that has never coached a basketball team really before, other than an academy in Finland.
But does that not remind you of something?
Modi Mayor.
Exactly. First year.
I don't know.
How do
I'm
we
just
do?
nervous. We've really rebuilt what Breakers culture means. We've strayed away from our Kiwi talent and gone with locals from Australia with Jonah Bolden, Grant Antovich.
It's the way the game's going, though.
It is.
You see it everywhere.
It's weird. These boys have never played together before. There's a lack of consistency in the squad. However, that's exciting, right? These boys have never played before. There's a chance that they could really do something special and absolutely light up the league. And that's why my expectations are low. I'm not saying they're not going to do well, but I think my expectations are low because I want them to break my expectations that easily so I can be happy. I just don't want a repeat of the Tasmania stint in COVID where they had about 5 wins, because I feel like it could really go south.
It's a good way to look at it. I'd say I'm more of an optimist, to be honest.
If you think we can win it all, that's crazy. It's kind of hard. I look around the rest of the league, and last season was an incredibly entertaining year of the NBL. The final series between Tassie and Melbourne last year was something I haven't seen in the NBL in a long time.
Very entertaining.
A 5-game series that went literally down to the wire. Melbourne dominated the NBL all year. Chris Golding looked phenomenal.
Matthew Dellavedova.
A great team.
Lockdown defender.
Tassie come in, defend the island is what they like to say. Jack McVeigh puts himself on the map, goes from, everyone knew Jack McVeigh before the season started. Milton Doyle is there too, a really talented team. Jack McVeigh hit one of the best game winners I've ever seen in the NBL. The pull-up, bloody half-court heave that he made, I've never seen anything like it.
Good for Tassie.
Great for Tassie.
I love to see those, smaller cities coming in, disrupting those big, Melbourne, expected to win it all. It was a little bit of an underdog story in a way.
Absolutely,
I love to see it.
I think you don't really remember Tassie wasn't even in the NBL. Well, they obviously had their stint earlier on when the NBL was around, but they hadn't come back. And then I think it was 3 or 4 seasons ago they got relaunched, and they just built from the ground up. And to win a title in about 3 or 4 years since they come back into the league, it was remarkable. Jack McVeigh, big shout out to him, man. Got his Olympic dream as well. With Will Magnay as well, of course, from Tassie as well, going over to Paris and falling a little bit short in Paris with the Boomers. I was a bit disappointed in them.
Controversial, might I say?
How so?
I love to see them giving a shout out to some of those NBL players, but one of the big players that the Australia Boomers left out of that team was Matisse Thybulle.
That's your boy.
So, that's my boy.
That's your boy from the Blazers.
Leads the NBA consistently in steals. I believe he's on the longest active streak of getting a steal in every game, so that was quite controversial when I saw that. But I love to see the shout out to NBL players. I think it's important to show that players still have that pathway to international teams.
Completely off topic and skewed, but I'm going to throw this at you. Matisse Thybulle makes the Boomers. Do they win a medal in Paris? One player. Does he make that big of a difference?
I would have to say yes.
Really?
I think he has consistently proven that he is one of the best defenders in the world on the perimeter. And I believe just his wealth of experience in the defensive side of the court would have just gotten them over that edge. I think they would have got the bronze medal.
So I reckon he missed out because of his lack of offense, though, which is really unfortunate. Because I think Matisse Thybulle is an excellent player, and I also love his YouTube videos when he was in the bubble. That was good fun too. If Matisse Thybulle made the Boomers, I don't know if they came up really short. Like there was a few close games. I was watching them quite a bit. Josh Giddey had a really good stint in Paris, and Patty Mills a little hit or miss there. Matisse
quite
Thybulle
heartbreaking for Josh Giddey. Got quite emotional in those games.
The thing is with the Boomers, man, they have a really bright future ahead. I mean, Rocco Zikarsky's going to come through.
Oh my gosh.
Man, Rocco Zikarsky, he's going to be something else. And, in about 4, maybe even 8 years, the Boomers really could be on top of that international game. It's a shame the Tallbacks might not be trending in the same direction, but, a smaller country.
Yeah.
But we have some players coming through that might be...
Can we talk about that for a second, Finn? We saw Steven Adams got drafted into the league back in, 2012?
13?
13, I think.
Around there.
2013, I believe. And, a lot of people thought that was kind of the starting block for New Zealanders, pathway to the NBA. But we just haven't really seen that standout talent yet.
Yeah. Mojave King was probably the closest. We claim him, right? Technically, we claim him.
Yeah, well, he was actually born in Dunedin. He had father. His father was American, and he played for the Otago Nuggets in the NZNBL.
Well, there you go.
Very storied career there. So Mojave was raised in Dunedin for a little bit. I know he spent some time in Australia as well. But no, it's just good to see, a homeborn. I'm not going to say raised.
We claim him.
We claim him.
We definitely claim him.
And he's come back to the Breakers. So just the fact that he's re-signed with us, still having the opportunity to be playing in the G League, that's a big opportunity to pass up on. But he obviously sees something in the NBL and specifically in the Breakers. So it'll be very interesting to see how he does in this upcoming season.
I had really high hopes on Mojave King as a young guy. He went over and played in the G League Ignite when Scoot Henderson was there and was a genuine talent. I think he played 30 games.
Scoot Henderson.
Looked great. And, he got drafted, I think, late second round to Indiana. I thought they were going to give him a shot. Gets thrown into the G League with the Mad Ants and appeared in 15 games and only averaged about 9 minutes a game. So I'm not sure if he was waived or cut, but, I mean, he's ended up back in New Zealand just for hopefully... if he has a standout season, there's a good chance he could probably end up back in the NBA if he really shows out here, which, he's a 3-level scorer, athletic, can get his own shot. I mean, he's an international threat. He's an NBA player. So it'll be interesting to see what he brings on the Breakers front.
And correct me if I'm wrong here, Finn, but you mentioned he had a stint down in the Mad Ants, Indiana, obviously assigned him to the G League team. It seems over the years that the G League has kind of now become a place for players' careers just to go downwards. You don't often see players coming back from the G League into the NBA.
Yeah.
So maybe Mojave Kings kind of seen a new pathway back to the NBA. Maybe one with more potential through the NBL. So it kind of just speaks volumes to the development that the NBL's been taking.
Yeah, I think Mojave King just needs more game time to prove himself, really. So I mean, I think he will start on the Breakers this year. I don't see why he wouldn't.
Has to.
Don't see why he wouldn't. But yeah, what do you think the lineup's going to look like anyway? I mean, we'll tidy up this lineup and then we'll move on.
I believe obviously PJC is going to be the go-to player at the 1, playing the most minutes of anyone in the team. I think you can pencil that in. That's guaranteed. At the 2, I believe it's going to be... who would you say? Probably...
Matt Mooney.
It's
going to be Matt Mooney.
Matt Mooney. You could play Mojave at the 2.
I think Mojave's going to start at the 3, personally.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. And then I think Jonah Bolden has earned his spot at the 4.
100%.
And the 5 will be interesting.
It's going to be... I think... Well, Freddie Gillespie's obviously come in. He's going to... Freddie Gillespie has an interesting story. I'll jump on him for a little bit. You know, somebody that's bounced around a bit. He had a little stint in the NBA with the Magic and I think the Raptors. He's played for Bayern Munich recently as well. But you look at his pro ballers, you know,
not the best numbers.
He hasn't played a lot anywhere really. Like he's really struggled for minutes. So for him to come down to New Zealand and really give it a shot, I'm not sure. It's kind of hard to say what he brings to the table. I mean, he's an undersized center, but I mean, he's very athletic, and I think he's a great defender. So, hopefully, he kind of gives me some Derek Pardon vibes from that run we had 2 years ago.
And speaking of undersized centers, we actually have Sam Menenga, fellow Westlake student. I know you know him. From your time at Westlake, Finn.
Yeah, interesting.
And he is also a smaller center. You know, we could run some small ball lineups with Sam at the 5, a younger player, maybe more potential, dare I say, than Freddie Gillespie. So as the season goes on, you could see maybe a switch in that starting 5 if he hasn't already earned it for himself.
Yeah, well, I mean, Sam Meninga is definitely going to be that backup 5, for sure. And then I think, you know, we'll cast our over the bench as well. I mean, Mitch McCarron, you know, a veteran point guard, bounced around the NBL his whole career, just had a stint over here in New Zealand playing for the Taranaki Airs. He's just a veteran guy, really good locker room guy, I'm sure, and a great passer. And then we have at the 2, Sean Bairstow, Australian guy, just finished up a 4-year career over in the States playing for college. And then at the 3, we'll obviously probably have Kareem Lopez. I hope he does get some good minutes. Then Grant Antovich, another Australian local, has just had a stint over in Europe, played for Southeast Melbourne, and then obviously Sam at the 5. And then to round out the last 2 remaining spots is obviously Max Darling, who just got transitioned to a full rostered player from a development player last year. Big fan?
Big fan of Max Darling's game. You know, I like those kind of bigger guards, like to bully people in the paint. I think, watch out, he's a sleeper for this team.
Yeah?
Watch out for Max Darling this coming season.
And then obviously Dane Pinot, still on the team as well, who's had a pretty lengthy career in the NBL, good locker room guy, comes in, does his job pretty well. So, yeah, that's probably that'll round out the roster, and obviously development players, including young Carlin Davidson, who just had an outstanding year in the NBL down here. Super bright future for him, very athletic guy. Hopefully we keep him around. He could be that next athletic wing. Who's a super athletic wing that we've seen in the NBA that's caught your eye?
Not to mention the player behind you.
Shaedon Sharpe.
Shaedon Sharpe, you could go that route. Also the player who has a jersey right behind you there. I know you'd love to talk about him for a second, Finn.
Paul George. Carlin Davidson,
very
Paul George.
Athletic wing, lockdown defender.
Carlin maybe on the way.
Who knows?
And then obviously Alex McNaught, another development player who's, you know, proved himself a little bit, got some minutes last season. And then the newest development player for the team, Kaya Isaac, who just had a great year for the Canterbury Rams as well. Won the Rapid League MVP, which I thought was really cool. So he rounds out the development roster. So some bright futures here. We're still keeping it local with our development players and stuff, you know, hopefully for the future. So yeah.
And basketball is not far around the corner, Finn. The Blazers are actually scheduled for their first preseason game.
The Blazers or the Breakers, bro?
The Breakers. Sorry. The Breakers scheduled for their first preseason game against the Sydney Kings on Friday the 30th of August.
Yeah, man.
So, going to be very interesting to see what lineups are run out there. just how the team's gelled and what the coach has been able to done with them. In these few months.
Friday Night Hoops, just around the corner. I'm definitely going to be tuning into that, and obviously we'll be breaking down what we see on the next episode 100%. It's hard to really take away anything, important from these preseason games. I mean, it's going to be the first time these boys have ever got together for a game, other than scrimmaging, of course. And they're playing a Sydney Kings roster who's obviously, kept some great players, returning players. But, we did beat them in the play-in tournament last year. I mean, obviously, it's not an important game. It's just going to be a good way to kind of scope out how the boys are going to look early on, potentially. Hopefully everyone gets a run. It'll be interesting to see what their conditioning is like. They might get pretty tired.
Yeah, it'll be definitely good to see everyone get a run. Just get that little bit of experience, even though it's not the regular season. Just to feel what it's like to get out there, shoot around, playing with one another, learning different drills that they can run, pick and rolls, how to find a wide open shooter, that sort of stuff. It's going to be very interesting. And we also have the Blitz schedule coming up.
The Blitz is just around the corner. Something that got introduced, a few years back. It's the biggest, preseason tournament that they run in the NBL. It comes out of the Gold Coast. It's over a 1 week period. But it got a bit of a weird format, though, and I'm not really sure how I feel about it. So every team plays 3 games, so you don't actually play everyone in the NBL, and there's no playoffs. No. It's simply 3 games over about a week, and then whoever has the most points at the end, included, wins obviously give you however many points. I think it's 5, and then obviously if 2 teams finish at the top with 3 wins each, and it'll come down to points differential. The Breakers haven't really done that well in the Blitz in previous years, but, it's just a really good way for them to get together before the actual season starts. And it's good hoops. I remember last year I was watching it, and Zylan Cheatham caught about 3 or 4 bodies early on. And at that point, I thought it was going to be our year.
Zylan Cheatham had a little stint with the New Orleans Pelicans.
He did. Played for the Squadron.
Yes.
But, yeah, unfortunately, he got injured last year quite a bit with that foot injury early on. But, I mean, he came back and he added a lot to the team. It was a real shame because he was so athletic. The Breakers had never really had anyone that was just out here postering people like that.
Oh, sorry. Let me just mention for a second Thomas Abercrombie. Finn, do you remember that dunk that he had on Jaren Jackson Jr., the NBA's Defensive Player of the Year, and Thomas Abercrombie absolutely posterized him.
It's so funny because the Breakers milk that almost every year. I see the Breakers post that at least once a year. Especially when they go over for their little stints, like when they do the preseason for the NBA when they go over.
Very entertaining.
They're okay. I don't mind them. It's a bit of a weird one. I have a weird opinion on that because the thing with the Breakers heading over to the US to play some of these NBA teams in their preseasons, it's bang smack at the start of the NBL season. So it's not in the NBL preseason. So the Breakers will take like about a week break with no games in the NBL, and they'll go play NBA teams, they have to fly 12 hours on a plane, maybe even more, depending where they're playing.
But let's be honest, it's not going to be the other way around. You're not going to have any NBA teams coming mid-season down to little old New Zealand to play a game. And I think it's a really good way to just test themselves against the best players in the world. I think back to when the Breakers played in 2019, I believe, when we had RJ Hampton as our next star.
Oh, yeah.
And he played against Ja Morant. That was very entertaining.
Yeah, I remember that.
Also, Chris Paul, I believe. I think they played the OKC Thunder.
Right.
So, it was great to see them out there testing themselves against the best players in the world. And also, last year, we actually had a preseason game against the Portland Trailblazers.
We did.
And we played against our previous next star,
Ryan Rupert. Yeah.
So that was just quite a cool,
little
warming
throwback
moment to see.
Yeah.
Just rekindling with his fellow teammates that he spent time with down here in New Zealand.
Absolutely. I don't know. I like the concept because I think it's a really good way for, New Zealand exposure in basketball to go over to America, and some of these guys that have been potentially snubbed from the NBA, like Parker Jackson Cartwright, Freddie Gillespie, who's had a stint there as well, Matt Mooney, they can go over and kind of prove themselves, in a one-off game. There's going to be people watching, of course. But I just think it's a really disruptive time of year to go over and to the other side of the world and play basketball against people that you don't care about them, you're not scouting them. It's an interesting one. I feel like last year it really disrupted the Breakers season. They struggled really early on, and I think that might have had something to do with it, but Who knows? This year it might be different. Fingers crossed. You know, it's a new year, new team, completely new experience for the boys. So we'll see how it goes.
And just on that note that you mentioned before, PJC, about being snubbed from the NBA, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it has a lot to do with just their height. I think, you know, he's a very skilled player,
tiny.
and it's just extremely unfortunate that he happens to be, how tall is he?
Maybe 5'7",
5'7",
very
you know,
tiny.
and that's just almost, I hate to say it, impossible to make the NBA at that height, despite the skill set that he has. You know, the only player in recent memory that we've seen be able to do it was Isaiah Thomas.
Yeah.
And even he's kind of been driven out of the league.
Absolutely. I mean, bro, Isaiah Thomas averaged 27 in a year.
Yeah.
As somebody who's 5'7" or 5'8" to do that is quite absurd. So, you know, PJC, one of the most skilled players we've ever seen touch on our shores. But give him about 4 or 5 inches. and then, you know, 4 or 5 inches, maybe 6, he'd probably be over there.
Yeah. But, yeah, that is a brief breakdown of the players that we have joined the Breakers for this upcoming season. It's going to be a very interesting season, see how they all mold together, and, yeah, hopefully do the best possible.
All right, I'll cut you off just before we move on to the last little chat we have here. Where do they finish? 1 through 10, after the all set is done, before the playoffs, where do they finish?
Okay, I might have been a little bit too optimistic before, but we're doubling down. The Breakers are going to win it all this season. You heard it here first, William Tremaine.
You think they'll finish in the first seed before going into the playoffs?
No, I believe they're going to finish the 2 seed.
2 seed.
But I believe they're going to pick it up in the playoffs. And hear me out, I think we're going to have a home final in Auckland as well. I don't think the 1 seed are going to make it to the final.
5-game series in the final.
Yeah.
So the home court advantage will get it first.
Home court advantage will be given to us in the final because I believe the 3 seed will knock out the 1 seed in the other seed.
Whoever that's going to be. We'll probably cast our eye over the rest of the league in the next episode as we get closer to the Blitz. So yeah, I mean, in terms of me, I don't know. I'm optimistic, but my expectations are low. Do I think we sneak into the playoffs? I think we do with some of the talent that we have on this team. PJC returning. I don't think we get an automatic entrance into the semi-finals, so I'm cutting the 1 and 2 seed. But I think we're going to finish somewhere in probably the 5th or 6th seed, and going to have to, you know, win those 2 playing games to make it into that semi-final. So probably sitting around 5th or 6th. Will, I like your optimism. You know, finishing 2nd. How cool would that be? Straight into the semi-final.
I'm feeling another Mody Meal type of season. You know, fresh coach comes in, puts the squad together. I think we're just going to be firing on all cylinders, to be honest, Finn.
I like your optimism. I really, really do. And you know what's coming up very soon as well? You know, probably the most prestigious basketball competition in all of the world.
Yes.
The NBA, not far away. Obviously, you know...
Let's talk about that for a second.
The draft, very recent. Obviously, the finals this season were a bit interesting. Wasn't the biggest fan, you know,
Worst
Celtics.
finals of the century.
Yep.
I'll put it out
Huge take. Century's kind of crazy, Will. I'll be honest. I've definitely seen some worse finals than that.
Of the 21st century.
Okay, maybe we can run with that. Obviously, you know, we'll just cast our eye over it very shortly. You know, you want to dive deep into the Blazers. You know, what are your expectations as a Blazers fan for this season? We'll go over this and then we'll wrap it up.
Expectations as a Blazers fan. You know, I believe we drafted possibly the best center of the draft. And Zach Edey.
Oh, Zach.
Sorry, Donovan Clingan.
Donovan Clingan.
Pardon my
he's on the
language.
Grizzlies, my friend.
Yes.
He's the
Donovan
Steve
Clingan.
Adams
Yeah, I think he's clearly proven that throughout Summer League he's been the best rookie center. Alex Sarr had a very, very rough start to the Summer League, along with Zachary Risachet as well. So
not a big fan of the 1 and 2 picks.
No, not very optimistic.
I really liked Reed Shepherd though at number 3.
Oh, Reed Shepherd's tough.
Right, that Rockets team's going to be interesting, eh?
Lock that in for Rookie of the Year.
Reed Shepherd, Rookie of the Year. You heard it here first, team. Yep. Clip it up. It's going everywhere. It's going viral. Right here on the Fast Break Pod.
Speaking of, guys, you really need to follow us on our socials. We have Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Spotify. Finn, can you share the links to those with the viewers?
Fast Break Pod NZ everywhere. TikTok, like you said, Instagram as well. Obviously, subscribe to us on the U of the Tubes. We'll be posting obviously weekly podcasts there. You know, a little bit of video for you, and then obviously Spotify. Give us a rating as well. Make sure you rate us up. And that sounded crazy. I almost said a crazy word, but I didn't. But yeah, and then you know what? We'll finish on this. as a Clippers fan,
Yeah.
not really sure how I'm feeling going into this year for obvious reasons.
Paul George.
The 2-1-3 era is over, team. The 2-1-3 era is over, and is probably one of the worst failed experiments in recent years. We traded away Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and about 27 million draft picks.
Great haul.
The Thunder, they're the future, and unfortunately, Paul George is now off to the 76ers. Bit greedy, taking a max deal. I don't think... I love PG, got his jersey back here for a reason. Did I think he was worth the max anymore? No. He signed a 4-year deal for Philly. He's going to be 38 when his contract's done, making $40 million a year at 38.
Maybe a bit of an L there for the Philadelphia 76ers.
Unless they win, then fair play to them.
Hit me out, Finn. Maybe if you look at it a bit more optimistically, you've still got Kawhi Leonard, one of the greatest players of the 21st century, and we haven't seen him as the clear-cut number one option on a team since the Toronto Raptors. So, now that Paul George is gone, not saying he was as good as Kawhi, but they were close. Could we have a breakout year for Kawhi again? I know he's plagued with injuries, but that could be a very interesting thing to watch.
See, the thing is, you say that, and I would love to agree with you. I think Kawhi's still in that prime. I think he's still one of the best players the league has to offer. But it honestly just comes down to availability. Does he have an oil change in the back pocket? Is he going to be a robot and then, rust up or tear his ACL? Shout out Joe Ingles for that, brother. Kawhi Leonard might have a really good year. Who knows? Him not sharing the court with Paul George is going to get a bit more ball time. James Harden obviously on the court with him as well. Russell Westbrook departing. Derek Jones Jr. getting picked up. It's very interesting. I don't know. My expectations for the Clippers are low. I mean, considering we had such a good stint when James Harden came in. We won 10 straight games. Looked like one of the best teams in the NBA, and then just all kind of went to crap nearing the end of the season. And then obviously your first round exit.
Yeah. It's unfortunate.
Very unfortunate, yeah.
And I think a good way to end this out, Finn, would be just quickly going through maybe your picks for who you have winning the upcoming awards for this NBA season.
Just straight up. Before the season even
MVP.
started.
Who is your pick?
Wow. That is so hard. I might... Oh, MVP. You've caught me really off guard. I didn't think you were going to ask this. I hope Jokic doesn't win it again, to be honest. You know what? We'll throw it out there. Luka Doncic for the 2025 NBA MVP. And Shea might be in for a close second there.
I'm going with Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Wow.
I think the Bucks going to turn it around.
Yeah.
Finishes the first seed in the East. And I just believe he's going to have his best career yet as a Buck.
Huge take, and you heard it here first, team. And we'll wrap it up at that. Thank you so much for tuning in to the first ever installment of the Fast Break Pod. We've covered a lot here with breakers, and obviously with the first preseason game next Friday, there'll be a lot to unpack from that. But make sure to, again, follow us on all socials, Fast Break Pod NZ on Instagram, TikTok. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and follow us on Spotify and give us a rating.
And guys, leave a comment down below. Topics you're interested in hearing from us. We'd love to hear your feedback. Do you want specific breakers content, or would you like us to maybe more broadly cover the NBL in general? And of course the NBA. I know there's lots of NBA fans out there. So yeah, we're always welcome to new ideas. So leave those down in the comments below.
Beautiful. Until the next one, team.